and welcome to the Hybrid School Builders Podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Foley, and I am so glad you are joining me today. I am a fellow grassroots founder who is hoping to make your journey toward founding a sustainable hybrid school a little bit easier. If you are dreaming of starting a hybrid school, or perhaps you've already gotten started, you are in the right place. Join me as we dive into real stories, practical tips, and hard-won lessons that I have learned to help you launch and grow your program with confidence. Remember, building a hybrid school is not just about creating a business or creating jobs. It's not even about just serving the children who attend the program. It's literally about reshaping the landscape of education, and we can do that one community, one entrepreneur, and one program at a time. Okay, so in this episode, let's talk a little bit more about some of that back-end infrastructure, paperwork sort of things that you have to have set up at some point before you open, okay? Some of this is like documents that are state or IRS things that you need to just be aware of and keep track of. Some of it is liability stuff, all right? So I'm just going to list a few things that you need to think about. Now, I'm assuming that you sent in your articles of incorporation for your business with your state, which is just establishing you as an entity. We talked a little bit about money management and setting up a business bank account, okay? Now, when you incorporate with the state, even if you are a nonprofit, you still don't have 501c3 status. That's an IRS designation, okay? And it's a whole different application you have to get approved for with the IRS. You have like a couple years to actually do that. It's a little bit expensive, but that's a separate process, okay? So I'm not going to get into that a whole lot. Just make sure that you understand if you're going for 501c3 status, you've got a couple years from incorporating to do that when you are an entity as a nonprofit, but you're not a 501c3 approved organization with the IRS yet, okay? So it's still important to stay on top of all your bookkeeping and all of that, very important. And then you're going to want to hire an accountant, most likely, to fill out that form and send it in. There's a fee to the IRS and there's a fee to the accountant to fill that out and apply for 501c3 status, okay? Once you get that, assuming that you get it, and there's a whole bunch of things with the language that you need to have and all of that, which is why you want to work with an accountant. But once you have that and they approve you, they'll send you a letter back, and you want to save that letter, make copies of it, because that's the letter that you're going to show anybody, whether it's a shop that you're getting sales tax removed, possibly, or a bank that proves you're a nonprofit. That is a copy that you want to have, okay? So that's important. It's a whole other thing. Now, sales tax, and I'm not going to say blanket statements on this for every single state because every state has its own regulations on all of this. This is just some stuff to check into with your state. A lot of times you can get out of sales tax in your state if you are a nonprofit. And again, you have to apply to the state, probably the state business association, whatever it's called, proving that you're a nonprofit, giving a report of your finances and all of that. And again, if you're approved, they will send you back paper, a number, and they'll say, okay, you're exempt from sales tax. And then when you go purchase things, like at the local store or wherever where you get you might have sales tax at the bottom, right, of your receipt. You can present that form to them and say, we're exempt from sales tax, and then you don't have to pay the sales tax, okay? There's a couple steps to it. You have to get the approval, you have to have the paper, and then sometimes this is useful if you buy a lot of things from one particular place. Like maybe you go to Staples and do your printing and buy office supplies and stuff there. You can open a nonprofit account there and they just save that file for you, and then you could just use that status that's already established as a nonprofit customer, okay? So that can just ease it so you're not running around all over the place to a bunch of different places, okay? But you have to apply for that again. Now, charitable contributions is another thing. Again, some of this is nonprofit stuff because it's more complex with nonprofits to jump through the hoops to actually get these benefits. So charitable contributions, it's like a solicitation thing. In my state, for example, you're supposed to send this in every year, but if you're not soliciting more than $25,000 a year, It's a very simple, like you basically are exempt from most of it. So you just send it in saying, here we are, we're exempt because we don't raise more than $25,000. Okay. And then you just send it in every year saying that. But if you are soliciting more than that, you're applying for grants, you're doing large fundraising events, all of that, you have to make sure that you check your state. And if there's charitable contributions registration that you have to have, you got to make sure you're on top of that. Okay. A lot of times there's an annual report that you have to send into your state that you have to, again, you have to check your business website of your state and see what the annual report requirements are. They might want a change of officers every year if you're a nonprofit, like your board changes whoever your officers are. Even an LLC, you have to, at least in Pennsylvania, you have to send in just a short 1-page thing saying that you're still a business, basically, with just a very small fee. So those are just things to check into with your state, okay? You can work with a lawyer, you can work with an accountant. They'll know this stuff, but it's just stuff to be aware of, all right? And then there's, of course, your taxes, all right? So if you're a nonprofit, it's a 990. You want to work with an accountant for that. You want to make sure your books are in order for that. If you're an LLC, you get taxed on your personal income. It depends on how complex it is. If you're working with an accountant, they should be able to handle that, okay? On your personal taxes, all right? So those are some of the major, like, paperwork things to be aware of. Now, some of the other infrastructure things you want to be aware of is, like, insurances, right? Not the most fun thing. Workers' compensation insurance. If you have employees, you want to have workers' comp insurance, and you need to probably find a local agent. It's going to be based on how much your salaries are. That's one of the insurances for employees. You also probably want to have liability insurance on your kids. You also want to have liability insurance. A lot of times this is much more affordable if you go through some sort of group program like National Church Group. You can also look into, like, event insurance. That's like for a part-time program, you might be able to have several policies over the course of the year that covers events, as in your school days are events. But you have to, like, explain what you are. And depending on your state and what you're calling yourself, what your state's calling you, or just whatever words you're using, it can be a little bit. I think places are becoming more aware of this language, but sometimes you have to explain, like, we're a nonprofit entity that provides educational services to homeschooled kids. Okay. And you might have to, don't say we're a school necessarily, even if you call yourself an academy or something, because a lot of times, unless you really are a school, like if you're registered with your state as a school, which is a different thing. But if you're just a nonprofit entity or an LLC small business that's providing, like, it would look like a tutoring service or something like that to students who are being primarily educated in some other way, right? It's like as a homeschooler. You probably want to frame it to the insurance companies that way because, in my experience, sometimes they don't know what you are. Like, they can't identify, they don't know where to look for what you are, right? And if you get into any of the school language, I've had this happen where they lump you in as if you were a private school, which is fine if you are a private school. But if you're not, it's a whole different animal, a whole different, like, entity, okay? So that's just the fun that you want to get your liability insurance, which covers injury to the children, and then your workers' comp. You might want to look into property insurance if you're owning any significant amount of the things that are in the space. Certainly if you own your space, for sure. That's like the homeowner's type idea, insurance for your actual building. Of course, you need that. You're going to have. But a lot of us are just renting space. We don't own the space. The church or something already has its own insurance. But you have maybe your books, or maybe you own some bookcases or some chairs or whatever. You might not own very much. If you want to look at if there was a flood or a burst pipe or a fire or something, and you had $5,000 or even $1,000 worth of books and equipment and stuff that got damaged, it's like a renter's insurance, a property insurance. So you want to look into that. Also, if you're a nonprofit, you want to look at directors and officers insurance. If you're an LLC, I believe it's called professional insurance. And that's basically insurance that just covers the governing body, right? Officers and directors insurance covers, like, the board and the officers and directors from decisions that they make that somebody might say were illegal or discriminatory or whatever. That insurance helps you with those kind of situations, okay? So those are, like, the 4 basic insurances you want to be looking into. Like I said, local agencies can probably give you some quotes on at least the workers' comp, because again, the states can be different with that. But you might want to look at some of either event insurance or some of the group insurances. Another tip, if you are a homeschool group, if you go to HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, you become a member there, you can get a number and you can go with their partner insurance, NCG, National Church Group, and you get a discount on that insurance. Okay, so those are some infrastructure pieces that you want to have in place. And the admissions part, I talked about admission software that you want to have in place. Again, this is all infrastructure to make everything go, right? It's the foundation that makes the organization like solid and legal and all of that. Your bookkeeping software, your admissions software, signups, all that kind of thing. You want to have the right kind of infrastructure in place for that. Payroll system, make sure that when once you're hiring, you're starting to pay people, you've got your payroll to take care of your human resources stuff. Making sure you get people's tax things taken care of, that they put in their withholdings into the tax information, that they get issued their W-2s at tax time, that they get their I-9, all of that when you're doing your hiring. Again, through a payroll system, it's generally there, but you still need someone to like manage it and make sure that the papers are filed, clearances. If you have any kind of first aid safety training or mandated reporter stuff. Okay, again, you don't have to have all of this all together in like a month. You want to have those, make sure you know what those state and IRS paperwork is going to be. Put that on a calendar to make sure you take care of that stuff when it comes around, annual reports and all of that, and your taxes. Make sure your admissions is set up as you're bringing students in. Make sure your bookkeeping is set up as you're bringing money in and sending it out. Make sure your payroll is set up as you're hiring and you start paying people, and make sure your insurances are set up before you start serving your students, that your policy is started so that once students are on the property and people are being served, that all those insurances are in place, okay? So those are your major pieces of like not as much fun, not why you started this business, but infrastructure that will help you in the long run. And just one more time, if you're a nonprofit, put those compliance things on a calendar for the year and make sure your board knows about them and make sure that they are on top of helping you with that compliance. They should be saying, did this get done? Do I need to sign anything? Can I look at this? For things like annual reports, 990s, and that kind of thing, okay? The payroll and stuff like that is operational. All they need to do is make sure that the executive director is doing their job to make sure all of that happens, right? But they don't need to be involved in all of that as far as the board, okay? So hopefully that's helpful for you to understand those infrastructure pieces. Thanks so much for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure you check out the resources I am developing at startahybridSchool.com. Send me an email anytime. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.